Let's see. Ooh, there we go. We have sound. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us back here. Did you have productive, engaging workshop sessions? Amazing. Seeing lots of nodding heads. That's exactly how we want things to go. That is wonderful to hear. So, as you know, we have two different panels planned tonight. The first one is for our participants only. We'll be holding it in English, and it is on the topic of Sudan. And the second one will be held in German, but with simultaneous translation available. It will be open to the public, and it will concern itself with the changing role of the United States in the world. And in between, we have dinner served at 7 in the courtyard. We're very excited to have you join us now for this first panel of this evening. As you all know, the country of Sudan finds itself in the midst of violent conflict and collapsing state institutions. Sudan's emergency response rooms have emerged as a remarkable example of a grassroots organization engaged in community protection. The networks were created by local communities with the goal of coordinating humanitarian support and mutual aid. And they demonstrate how solidarity and resilience can sustain a society during war. Now, one of our speakers, Alaa Ismail, unfortunately could not make it, but we'll be watching a video that she sent us in a moment. And then we're honored to have the network represented here tonight. We greatly look forward to learning how peace is practiced, how protection is practiced under extreme conditions. We'll be watching the video, and then to introduce your speakers to guide you through the conversation, we'll be joined by our moderator, ACP Advisory Board member and affiliated researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, Jan Pospischil, who I'm sure you will greet with a round of applause as he comes on stage. But first, let's watch the video.
Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alaa Ismail from Sudan. I'm deeply honored to join you at the Historian Forum for Peace this year. I also enable to be with you in person today. Sorry for that. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my voice from Sudan. I wish that I could speak about my country's rich history. It is diversity, it is resilience, and the dream of its young people. And instead of that, like many Sudanese, I have become someone who carries the story of war, but I refuse to let war be the only story the world hears about Sudan. Today, I want to speak about another story of humanity, story of courage, story of the ordinary people who choose compassion when hearts surrounding them. Because even in war, we still have a choice. We can choose violence, or we can choose humanity. When the war started in April 2023, it didn't only destroy buildings. It shattered families, interrupted education, emptied hospitals, displaced millions, and transformed everyday life into struggle for survival. Within days, many institutional collapse. The system people relied on disappeared almost overnight. The question became simple: who would help people survive? The answer didn't come from government or international institution. It came from neighborhoods. It came from volunteers. It came from young people. It came from young women. It came from ordinary citizens who decided that saving one another was the only possible response. This is how thousands of Sudanese choose humanity. For me, this was not only something I witnessed. It became my life. As a coordinator with the Sudan Emergency Response Rooms, I worked alongside hundreds of volunteers who risked everything to keep communities alive. Every single day, I meet people who had lost their homes, yet continuing serving meals to displaced families. I met volunteers who had buried members of their own families in the morning, and they returned back to the humanitarian work in the afternoon because someone else still needed help. I watched young women organize medical support while bombs were falling nearby. I saw ambulance moving through dangerous streets because someone believed one more life could still be saved. None of these people consider themselves heroes. They simply believe that another person's life matters. This is what choosing humanity looks like. My work didn't stop inside the Sudan. Through my work with people to people, I met Sudanese refugees who had crossed the border carrying almost nothing except memories. Many had left behind their home, their professions, their school, and sometimes even members of their own families. Yet, despite an unimaginable loss, I continue to see something remarkable. They still share food, they still supported strangers, they still comfortable children who were not their own. War had taken away almost everything, but it had not taken away their humanity. Through my work with the Peace for Sudan, I have also learned another important lesson. Peace is not simply the absence of war. Peace is something we practice. It's practiced every time communities choose dialogue instead of revenge. Every time young people reject artists. Every time women rebuild trust inside divided communities. Every time volunteers refuse to let the fear define their future. Peace being long before political agreements are signed. It begins in our daily choices. Many people ask me, how do you continue? The truth is, there were days when I had no answer. There were days when exclusion felt stronger than hope. There were days when every phone call carried terrible news. Another friend displaced, another hospital attacked, another child without medicine, another family searching for missing loved ones. But every morning, I remember something, very important something. Hope is not something we feel. Hope is something we build. Sometimes one meal at a time, sometimes one child at a time, sometimes one conversation at a time, sometimes simply by refusing to give up. Today, I'm not only here as a humanitarian worker, not only as the peacebuilder, not only as the Sudanese women. I be here carrying the voices of thousands of volunteers who will never have the opportunity to stand or to sit on this stage. People whose names you may never know, yet whose courage you keep the entire community alive. If the world wanted to learn something from Sudan, let it be this. Local community are not passive beneficiaries, they are leaders. Young people are not merely victims, they are peacebuilders. Women are not survivors, they are decision makers. Community are not just waiting to be saved, they are already saving one another. What they need is recognition, protection, and genuine partnership. Today, my message is simple. It's very simple. Don't remember Sudan only as a country of war. Remember Sudan as a country where humanity refused to surrender, where volunteers became lifelines, where neighbors became the first responder, where young people became leaders, where women carried inter-community through impossible circumstances, and where, despite everything, people continue to choose people continuing again and again choosing peace over the violence. I dream of a Sudan where children no longer recognize the thousand of bombs before they recognize the sound of school bells, where hospital heal instead of becoming targeted, where displacement is replaced by return, where peace is not practiced under the fire, but practiced in freedom. Until that day comes, we will continue choosing humanity, not because it is easy, but because it's the only future worth building. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you so much. Alaa Ismail, Sudanese young women.
May I invite both of you to come up with me? Thanks so much. I'm joined now, following on this powerful message, by two colleagues that I both know for some time now. Alsanosi is also part of these emergency rooms. I know him from his work before in Small Arms Survey in Nairobi, but you have been also a journalist back in Sudan and also an activist for quite some time. So thanks so much for coming. Next to me, Winnifred Bedigen. She's at Leeds University. I think you're in the International Development Department, correct? Yeah. Yeah. And she is very well positioned to speak about local dimensions of peace building, and especially how peace works in situations of ongoing conflict, where I think you have first-hand experiences like there. I heard a few of those who are really encouraging and really interesting to hear. Perhaps to start the conversation, Sanusi, I might ask you to give us a bit of an overview where these emergency response rooms come from. I think it's a very interesting history to see. It's not just a humanitarian thing. It's much more than that. And then also how this work has translated back in what we just heard as a societal thing, as something of building communities and kind of sustaining resistance against this war.
Right. I mean, of course, we all heard and seen, the level of organization that was happening during the revolution. Before 2018, the revolution that toppled a 30-year dictator. There was a lot of the resistant committee idea emerged at the sitting. And that's, where most of these ideas happen, that people need to go back to the communities and start organizing and start bringing people together in a way that, decentralized in terms of structure, but they could actually be working together for a bigger purpose. Then COVID happened. Then these same units kind of shifted some of them to start combating disinformation, because COVID. Remember at the beginning people were saying, "Oh, if you touch like a surface, then you get COVID, and if you did this and if you did that." So we were actually getting information from official sources and disseminating that. Hence the first emergency response rooms. That's hence the name. Why is the name? We don't just do medical, but it's still the name still remains the emergency response rooms when the war started. And the idea from the beginning was the people need to come together and support one another in these small neighborhoods. But what did not happen during the revolution is like the bigger coordination across Sudan for all the resisting committees. It didn't happen then, but during in this evolution of the solidarity movement, the ERs don't just have people from political background, like some of us with political background. Majority are just teachers, doctors, and women in their neighborhoods, kind of turning their homes into clinic and starting to work and then coordinate with the doctors who are in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And gradually, there was a need to organize and govern this because it got bigger really fast. Like the second week of the war was maybe like the first ER started. Within 2 weeks, we have 73 inside just Khartoum. And then right now, there are over 700 emergency response rooms with over 26,000 coordinators. These are the numbers we have. And I'm sure the number is more than that, but the coordinators are the ones who you see on the forms. And so this is the census we actually we have. So we've managed to create this big movement that needs not just only coordination, but also governance in a way that we started to talk about how each coordination starts from a district to locality to a state. So each state should be able to create their own charter that governs the way they do things. And these charters shouldn't be the same. Like every state will sit down and talk about, okay, what is important for us, and then they create the charter, and then they kind of we put all these charters together to create the national charter, which is the LCC charter, and it does not suppress the state charters, but it's still something to govern the bigger coordination. Solely humanitarian. Why? Because right now, the situation does not allow for any, even though we're also feeling some of the civic space, because it's really shrunk since the war started, started like SAF and the RSF, and there was good civic room in the middle. And the more the war is continuing, this space is shrinking, and people are either picking sides, either with SAF or with the RSF, and creating this really awkward situation, whether it's on the ground in Sudan or in social media, for anybody who's saying no to war. So how to navigate that? Because right now, we have ERs, and I think this is where I'm kind of entering towards peace. The war created polarization in the country in a way that rhetorics and words like, the Northern Nilotic Arabs or the Darfuri Arab, the Zagawa of Darfur or Darfur. So this is how people speak right now. But ERs across, like all the way from Halfa, all the way to Kafia Kenji and to West Darfur and to Blue Nile. So you will be, and this is where like the true beauty of this comes when you're in a meeting or in a forum online, when somebody from Kapkabia sharing how they dealt with the authorities, and then somebody from River Nile would learn from that and try to deal with, because we have 4 different areas of control, different authorities. But this lesson from here would be transferable, and people use that to actually to kind of operate in so many different areas. You cannot even say the word peace. Like in Darfur, in Khartoum, you can't say the word peace. It's political. So, well, I mean, we're working like names like peaceful coexistence, or kind of community cohesion. Because when you say peace, then immediately, because this war has put the Sudan into those who won the war, which is the 2 warring parties and the over 100 different militias fighting the war. So it's not only SAF and the RSF, it's many militias, many rising generals with their new ambitions, right, on this war. So these are all in one side, and everybody who's saying peace or no to war in another. So when you just start talking in your community, start talking about peace, you're immediately labeled, and they're starting to use phrases to kind of alienate you so that people don't listen to you. One, two, they could actually justify harming you. You start saying peace. Oh, okay, so you're with these guys. So you're a spy. You're reporting our activities, la la la. So people start targeting you. So what the arts is doing is assisting in localized peace mediations. There's a lot of intercommunal conflicts in whether it's in Darfur or in Kordofan between a tribe and a tribe, and then usually like we did mediation between Salamat and Beni Halba, and it actually lasted over 9 months before it broke again into war. We've done a peace conference in Da'ain. We brought 3 different fighting tribes, forever been fighting. We brought the youth into a conference and kind of helped mediate like localized peace. I mean, I think we don't really put all this stuff in our social media, but I think the UNDP did a recent study about all this localized peace mediation. I think if you looked, you'll find all these efforts that are being done through the 3 years. But all these are usually not sustainable in a way that the war economy in the country right now, it's what is selling. It's how like for every tribal leader contributing to this rhetoric of war and just talk about, oh, we're with these people or with that people, and it translates into funds, translates into money, translates into some sort of status within either the community or within in the area they operate, within the controlling forces of that area. But like peace doesn't translate into money for them or into, so now you try to work on the generation, the youth generation, and like kind of incentivize them to work for peace, because it is the better option. It's not war. So as like an official stand of emergency response rooms on what is happening in Sudan is that we do not have official stand on peace or war or how this war should end. And I'm going to explain why is that. Because the official stand here, we have to be neutral. And then even saying no to war is not considered neutral in Sudan, because you have as I just explained. So by saying no to war and let's have peace, you're endangering the life of over 26,000 volunteers across line, whether it's under self-controlled areas or under the RSF-controlled areas or under the Hilo-controlled areas or Abdul Wahad-controlled areas. So we try to stay neutral. We don't have an official stand when it comes to peace or war. We do not engage in any official capacity in negotiations or mediations officially, like through whether it's the now CONTAD or Quad or before that, like African Union and other mediators. But we do try to influence and use the networks, because our network has a lot of different people, like Alaa, for example, who really wants to be a politician, maybe. Other people as well who like really wants to engage in politics and they want to, so we kind of influence some of these civil society conversations and like kind of put youth agenda into the table and youth participation into the table. The ER started as a solidarity movement. The file at hand now, it's humanitarian, saving lives, but there is no telling to what the evolution of the ER would be, whether it's going to go into politics. When is it a question of whether or when? Is it a question of sequencing how to like leverage and get to that space without harming the movement, without harming the people? as well. So I think, yeah, I think time would show and tell that this movement is like right now. Beside just humanitarian, we're doing a lot of other things. Like we're doing research. With research and learning, we're doing the forum, which literally brings so many different people discussing like really tiny, small topics from hate speech into combating this and combating that. So we're doing a lot of different projects at the same time, and we kind of it's all voluntary. That's the most important part. Like there's no compensation or salaries, or it's just all voluntary. Yeah.
Allow me one follow-up question. It might be interesting really for a lot of people. You described very well these incredibly difficult conditions emergency rooms are working in. What I always find fascinating and hard to understand sometimes, even how do you maintain the communication? How do you maintain even something like a common vision in a highly polarized environment where basically people try to leverage you into one corner or another? This would be very interesting to understand.
Right. So the structure is it's the strengths of the movement is the structure, and the leader is the system. So there's no like president or director or a founder or So and the system, the way it works, it balances between elected officials from the smallest neighborhood all the way to the national level, and we call them working groups. The working groups are people into these different volunteer roles by merit. So if you're a doctor, you are in the medical office. If you're a journalist, you're either in the media office or in communication or external communication. If you're a finance person, you're in the finance. So the working groups actually governed by the charter, and the elected officials who will be literally elected, and you serve 2 months, and then after 2 months, either you get voted again for another 2 months, and that's it, or they bring somebody new. So every 4 months, as an elected representative, we call them reps, and your job is literally to advocate on behalf of your neighborhood. If it's on the neighborhood, if it's on the locality level, and if it's on the state level, you're advocating on behalf of the entire locality, and if it's at the LCC, the national level, you're advocating on behalf of within these councils. So practicing local governance and also practicing just civic engagement. How do you raise a petition and get people to to agree or not? How do you get much of support to your locality? The people who trusted you with stuff, they have needs. How do you do that? And I think this is actually now is also aggregating, practice of local governance within all the states. You will try it at some point. Like if you're not on the working groups, at some point they will vote you in to represent them, and then you just start to learn how to do that. So that's the structure. And the communication is these small groups are specialized small groups. So we use apps like WhatsApp, Signal for these groups. So you would have small groups within, within this, and then you have for example, the LCC, all the reps from the LCC, they're in one group, but that doesn't, you can't have anybody within that group. So it's like, and that's how we're doing it. It's like an online digital structure. But the linkages are between all the groups and all the working groups, because we have a system that actually works. It doesn't really work without the linkages of all the different groups. Reps and the working groups at the same time. So we call it the F system. It's formed from 1 to 5 with SOPs that they make the entire structure working. So that's how this thing works. And usually support goes straight to the basic level. It doesn't go to the LCC. It gets advocated at the level of the LCC, but it reaches straight to the ground. So that's how, yeah.
Thanks so much. It's very interesting, this structural approaches in such adverse conditions, almost like a peace structure in war, effectively, that we see here. Winnie, I think it would be very interesting to bring you in here. I know that your experience is a bit further south, so it's more like in the South Sudan, Uganda, border areas. But I think in a way it's quite comparable because you have these militia structures. We had not so much now, but historically. So I'd be interested in your reflections about especially how you do peace at more local level in such war conditions.
Okay. Thank you so much. For giving me the opportunity to tell you how peace is done in South and South Sudan, and thank you so much for talking about the work you're doing. First of all, if we just have to rewind a little bit, peace is not, or conflict is not a new thing in Sudan or South Sudan. The country has been at war even before colonialism. As societies used to fight themselves, and they would find ways of uniting and all that. So what we see in terms of what is happening is they are not really new frameworks as such. It's just that they have a new dimension, and where they start from is a bit different. But in these different local communities, there were those humanitarian kind of actions that were taking place even in pre-colonial days. And those are the frameworks I talk about in my research, because much as we know that, Sudan, South Sudan, they were colonized and they adapted the frameworks that were like British, first the Ottoman Empire, then the British. In rural areas, they still have structures in place that deal with these issues, daily issues, everyday concerns. In the southern part of Sudan, for example, if you look at the main some societies, I think I chatted with you yesterday about an institution called the Monyomiji, and then the counterpart of that, the female institution, is the Honyomiji. These structures are so useful when it comes to making peace, keeping peace, building peace, outside of the national frameworks, outside of the international frameworks. These structures have been there. So whether you're hearing about war in South Sudan or you're not hearing about it, these institutions are there. Often people go out there and say, okay, there's no institution, there's no law, but I don't think that's really the case. The institutions are there, traditional institutions are there. And it's good that the young people are trying to come up with, ways of trying to draw from from the context and meet the needs of the community. And this is what those institutions do. So let's say, for example, South Sudan, sometimes so much anarchy, the state is not there. So the state is not there. So who provides the social services? Who is providing food? So the institution itself, the Honyomiji, the Monyomiji, the women, they actually organize themselves into these groups that provide for the needs of the community. So they provide medicines. The medicines are usually like the local herbs in situations that they cannot afford the Western medicines. They provide food. Sometimes if they can't provide food, they might ask for the help of their sons and their husbands, and this might also cause some sort of contention, because it can even cause conflicts, like where we know some communities, they have always had, they don't have food. So they kind of encourage their sons or their husbands to go and raid another community to be able to feed the other community. But apart from that, they've always talked with each other and they come up with agreements on how to ensure that each community is sustained. There's an example of the Miserea and the Dinka, the Ngok Dinka, these are pastoralists and the farmers. So when the animals will need to drink water, have pasture and all that. But when there's like a situation where animals have to have a passage, but they have to pass through a certain society, of course they have to cross people's farms, foods and all that. And with the animals, you cannot prevent them from eating the crops of the other ethnic group. So usually what they have, there are customs in place that govern that. So the local communities, the Ngok Dinka, they create the passage routes, and they develop these passage routes and the laws that guide the passage routes based on the community laws. So they give them the route and say, okay, you pass here. If your cows eat our crops, these are the rules. This is how we shall resolve the issues. And that's what has happened and enabled them to kind of live in peace and coexist for years. So it's some of these kind of localized means that I think are very useful when it comes to sustaining some of these communities, because in most cases, the humanitarian crisis is actually, when you talk about humanitarian help, normally it depends so much on the West, right? The West has to donate and all that. But in the event that the West can't donate, and there are some instances where some people don't even receive anything. Yeah, you've seen situations where it's only people in the camp that get some sort of help. But then what about those people who have remained in the rural areas? Because often not everybody runs to the camp. There are people who remain in the rural villages. And how do they sustain themselves? They use the same sorts of solidarity practice where every person within a family is concerned about their neighbor, and they support each other, and they take food, they share water, they share whatever they have. And it's still happening up to now, and I think it's a good way to draw from some of these practices and customs, other than thinking like, okay, when there is no West, when there is no humanitarian crisis, everybody in South Sudan is dying. No, that's not the case, because there are local frameworks that are helping, particularly the role of women. Yeah, women are really so key when it comes to peacemaking, peace building, and even sustaining the community during war. They brave themselves to go and fetch water. They're brave to go and collect food, collect firewood, to be able to prepare food, And women do this day in and day night, and it's very difficult sometimes to put these women at the forefront. And you find when it comes to saying that women should be on the table, UN, dialogue table, you don't see this kind of women who are really managing, conflict on a day-to-day basis. Instead, you see the one who are in the political kind of arenas, who are appointed to go and represent. Yeah, and yet there's a lot that women are doing at local levels. So it's, I think, time for us to really pay attention to what happens in those deep areas that the cameras are not even rolling. There's nothing that people know about those areas. But who is maintaining these societies? Who is providing for them? Who is keeping these children safe? It's not just about those people who are in the camps or who have run to the urban areas, but there are also those people who are still in the areas who have refused to run away for one reason or the other. Or maybe they couldn't even cross the line, because sometimes it can be that intense and they don't cross. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, thanks so much for that. One important point really I think you raised is the high degree of social organization that has been always there in what is Sudan at large. And I think this is something even the emergency rooms would not be understandable without this background of societal organization that is really high. I was surprised, especially in the South, where we do quite a lot of work around elections. In survey results that I've seen, people are actually used a lot to voting, especially also what you said. No, there's quite a lot of democratic tradition that happened even in areas that were completely authoritarian and dictatorial, basically. On the other hand, I mean, you also raised there is a bit the issue of not all traditions are nice ones. Like there is, issues with inclusion that are there. Perhaps just when you reflect a bit, especially in the areas you know better, how is this handled? On the one hand, there is these inclusive traditions, there is loads of organizations, there's always women and youth organizations, and they don't rely on international. So it's not the UN or NGOs telling people to do that. These organizations had been there. On the other hand, like how is this kind of tension between democratic traditions that have been there, the representational things, and on the other hand, the sometimes difficult role tradition plays in these organizational forms?
I don't know whether tradition is difficult, but I don't think it's difficult because actually when you look at everybody in Africa, African people will agree with me on this. People live, I think, traditional lifestyles, as I say. You still go back to your parents. You still have those beliefs that you believe in, you know, those practices and all that. So even if you were working in some office or somewhere, you go there and perform your role. But when you go back home, you perform those, you know, how the culture, you kind of align yourself with the culture. So that's what happens. I don't know, I don't want to say there are tensions as such, although sometimes it can be difficult for people to kind of function in a dual kind of way or lifeline, because when you're in office, you're doing another thing. Maybe you're dressing in one way or the other, but when you go to the community, you have to dress in another way. It's important for us to know that much as these customs are there, these traditions are there, maybe it's time we need to learn more about them and see how best we can pick on which one we can use and which one we may not be able to use to help us build peace. Because as I may say, even South Sudan itself is not homogeneous. There are many ethnic groups in South Sudan. And much as the kind of cultural practices and what might be similar, there are also differences in there. The problem now we have in research and all that is, I think, what has been said here, epistemic violence. There's not so much research that has happened in terms of studying these communities and getting what they have and using that at national level. Yeah, so it becomes difficult for people to know that actually these customs exist, or these laws exist, or these practices exist. Yeah, so I think it's time for us to really go deep to find out, do more research into these customs, or just open our minds to know that, because they are there. Even, you know, the people who build peace at national level, you talk about IGAD, you know, IGAD is there, African Union is there, and all that. And most members of these officials, these are people from these ethnic groups, and they know these customs, these practices, they use them at family levels. You know, when they have conflicts with their neighbors and all that, they use them. But when they come to national levels, they don't use them. Why don't they use them at national levels? Maybe it's time for the African people, South Sudanese, to maybe become brave and say, hang on, we have Monyomeji institution, why don't we borrow from them? Not everything about these institutions are perfect, but many of these can be modernized over time, just like we see the many institutions in the West. They've been modernized over time. And this is the problem we have, because most of the African institutions, they've never really been talked about, they've never been, you know, modernized and all that. So we always keep on neglecting them and keep on saying, oh, they are problematic, there are too many, there's nothing we can do about it, there's nothing over there. And yet actually they could really be looked into and maybe modernized and kind of developed to be able to use that at national level.
The problem is, I'm in an unfortunate position to having to end the conversation now. Since we have dinner coming up and not too much time in between dinner and the next panel. So thanks so much to both of you for the contributions. I hope we can continue the conversation outside over dinner. And please join me in thanking our two panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those very deep insights from the ground. Just a brief organizational note from my side. Thank you, of course, for being here, for joining the conversation. As you've heard, dinner is served in the courtyard. And just a reminder, we reconvene here to discuss the role of the United States in a changing world order at 8. The panel will be in German, but there is simultaneous translation available should you need it. So if English is your language, please feel free to join anyway. If you are not joining, there is a shuttle service taking you back to your accommodations in Oberwart and Bad Hatzmannsdorf at 10. And as always, tomorrow morning, 8:15 in Oberwart, 8:30 in Bad Hatzmannsdorf is when your shuttles leave. Enjoy, and I hope to see you back here at 8.